Anxiety is an emotion, not an illness. Anxiety tells us when something is too important to ignore. And it's there every day. If you didn't have anxiety, you'd go out in the morning, you'd step out into the road, you wouldn't look both ways because you wouldn't see any value in doing that. Nobody would live very long without anxiety because anxiety says, be careful, there might be a bus coming, look both ways. Anxiety says, check you've got your keys before you slam the front door behind you, because otherwise you won't be able to get back into the house. Anxiety is an emotion. When you're going on holiday, anxiety says, get to the airport in time. There might be a traffic jam. There might be queues at security. You might have forgotten your passport. Make sure you've got your passport. So anxiety is there.
Today, we are delving into the transformative world of remedial hypnosis with my extraordinary guest, Sarah Wellband. Sarah's journey is as fascinating as the work that she does. From her early days in the hospitality industry to financial services in London and Dublin, Sarah eventually found herself in the Portuguese countryside, pursuing a childhood dream of owning horses. What started as one horse soon became 7, alongside a menagerie of other animals. But it was during the pandemic that Sarah's professional path took a pivotal turn towards helping others through the power of the mind. Now, as a qualified remedial hypnosis practitioner with over 3 years of experience transforming lives, Sarah offers a unique approach that differs from traditional hypnotherapy by directly communicating with the subconscious mind, the engine room of our emotions, memories, and deepest patterns. So let's dive into the world of remedial hypnosis, the mysteries of the subconscious, and the remarkable possibilities for healing and transformation. Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Peter, and thank you for such a lovely introduction.
You're most welcome. Now, the human mind, which I'm always fascinated by, is perhaps our greatest mystery, labyrinth of conscious thoughts, unconscious patterns, and emotional responses that shape our reality in ways we can barely comprehend. We rationally understand so much about our world, but we remain strangers to the deeper forces driving our behaviors, fears, and limitations. And like sailors atop a vast ocean, we navigate the surface while remaining largely unaware of the powerful currents moving beneath us. You describe the mind as a ship, with the conscious mind as the captain and the subconscious as the engine room. Can you take us deeper into this metaphor and explain why connecting directly with the subconscious is so crucial for meaningful change?
Yeah, absolutely. The metaphor that I use is that your mind is like a ship. Your captain is your rational, logical mind, and your captain is able to plan ahead, is able to see in nuances, is able to think very deeply about any number of topics. But the captain has a couple of limitations. One, there is only one captain, and two, they can only concentrate on one or two things at a time. The easy way to explain that is you cannot read a book and cook a meal at the same time. You have to concentrate on one or the other. The crew, on the other hand, is a subconscious mind. And as you say, they are below decks. And normally there is not much conversation between the captain and the crew. But the crew is a subconscious mind. And the crew doesn't see things in nuance, doesn't see things in shades of gray. It's very black and white, right or wrong, good or bad. Handle everything that you are not concentrating on at any given time. All your automatic thoughts and actions. Driving your car is one of the obvious ones. You don't think about getting into your car, putting your key in the ignition. You just get in and drive. That's your subconscious. Your memories, all your memories are held by your subconscious. If you've ever thought about an old TV star or pop song, or even the name of an old school friend, and you stop thinking about it, an hour later or the next morning, that name just pops into your head. The mental picture I like to use is that a member of your subconscious crew has gone off to the filing cabinet, sorted through the filing cabinet, said that's the name she wants, and gives it to you. Creativity. Your subconscious is in charge of your creativity. People cannot create music, create art, create literature without using imagination, which the subconscious is entirely in control of. The last thing is emotions. If I said to you now, Peter, get angry, The only way that you would be able to get angry is by calling on memories, calling on imagination. So you'd have to delve into your subconscious. You couldn't just create anger out of nowhere. You'd have to use your subconscious. Your crew would have to step in to do that. This is what I work towards with my clients if captain and crew are working together at all times. But often we aren't aware of what's going on below decks. We can't easily see what's happening, and we don't understand why our subconscious is doing what it's doing. And that's because the captain doesn't come on board the ship until you're about 10 years old. For that first 10 years of your life, you don't have the mental capacity to decide what you're learning is correct. In the first 10 years of life, we absorb and learn more information than any other period during our lives. But the flaw in the design is that we don't have the ability to understand what we're learning. So we try to make sense of it. Your subconscious, your crew has been there from birth. The baby tells you exactly what it wants, or is all feelings and all emotions. I don't have children, but I've heard about them. So, as I said, the flaw in design is you're learning and absorbing and taking in all this information about who you are, what the world is, who your parents are like, what other people are like. And you absorb that and it becomes what's called a core belief. So it's the truth about who you are. With most people, there's a mixture of good or bad, negative and positive. If you don't have the best upbringing, you may well have a preponderance of negative core beliefs about yourself. I'm not a good person. I'm not this. I'm not that. If somebody's had a really good upbringing, and I'm not talking about money, I'm talking about love and all the other things that make a good upbringing, they could have very positive core beliefs. I can do anything. I'm a good person. That will very much stay with them throughout life. It's very difficult to even become aware of your core beliefs and then to change them, because you say, that's me, that's who I am. I hear people say, I've been nervous since I was a baby. Babies aren't nervous. That nervousness is something you pick up along the way. We're only born with two inherent fears. One is being dropped, and the second is loud noises, both of which we grow out of. We're born very much as a blank canvas. And everything that happens to us leaves a little dent in that canvas or a little brush stroke on that canvas.
I think it's important what you're highlighting in terms of childhood programming. You can measure certain things when you're young, certain feelings, but you can't necessarily interpret what you're measuring. That gives way to all kinds of different thoughts about it. In those formative years, before we develop critical thinking, our mind absorbs all those experiences like sponges, creating associations, core beliefs, and emotional responses that shape our adult lives. A father's angry voice, a grandmother's fear of spiders, the comfort of chocolate. When we're sad, these become the invisible architect. As we grow older physically, those parts of us remain frozen in time, and we're operating from outdated survival strategies. How do these early experiences become so deeply embedded in our subconscious, and why do they persist even when our conscious minds know better?
I'll answer the last part of your question first. It's because they predate the consciousness. A very good example from my own past, and it's not life-changing. When I was young, I used to wear flip-flops. And at some point, when I was probably 6 or 7 years old, I developed a blister between my toes. My mother told me my feet were the wrong shape for flip-flops. Very sorry, darling, you can't wear flip-flops. She probably didn't want to deal with any more blisters, which is fair enough. It wasn't until last year, when I was 60, I walked into a shoe shop and went, I wonder if I can wear flip-flops now. For 55 years, my mind it didn't even become a question. I would go into a shoe shop, see shoes with that bar between the two toes, and I go, no, I can't wear those. It wasn't a conscious decision. It was just, no, they're not for me. Once an idea or a protection system is accepted by the subconscious, there is no reason for that to change until we recognize it and do something about it. When we're little, for evolutionary reasons, we're very self-absorbed, very ego-driven. If mum and dad have an argument and you overhear it, most children will say, must have been something I've done, must be something I caused this, because everything has to rotate around their small world. That's how they make sense of things. The mind will say, okay, stayed up too late, or I talked too much, I'll stop doing that, and then mum and dad won't argue anymore. That makes sense to them, because that's the only thing they can figure out. You may find, from a personal point of view, my parents argued, everybody's does. Now, even many years later, I'm allergic to raised voices. If people argue, that's fine, but anybody shouts and I'm back off. That's something very deep in me.
With your analogy about the captain, the ship, and the crew, what you're saying is there's no captain on the ship.
Exactly. Until you're about 10 years old. Even then, you start having the mental capacity of working things out, but it's a slow process. It's not, captain doesn't come on and immediately start, I'm in charge. I think the latest studies say it's about 25 years old before people are fully mature. Until then, the balance is gradually changing from all subconscious to a lot more conscious.
You've given us a clear example of how these embedded thought can prevent certain decisions in your life. How might remedial hypnosis address this root cause rather than just the symptoms?
So the first thing to bear in mind is the subconscious is always looking for the strategy for the most happiness. The subconscious is all about happiness and about safety, but in that order. Because if the subconscious was intent on keeping us safe, people wouldn't jump out of airplanes with little bags on their backs or go off-piste skiing or horse riding, which can be very dangerous at times. Those things bring great happiness. The subconscious wants us to be happy and safe. What we do is try to find out the root cause. We don't always need to know it because sometimes the conscious isn't aware of it. It is buried so deep in the subconscious, but the subconscious knows. And we will say to the subconscious, okay, this behavior or thought pattern or feeling, you started doing it for a purpose. You were doing it for what you thought were the right reasons.
Like the flip-flops.
Flip-flops, exactly. Flip-flops hurt feet. Don't wear flip-flops. Very simple. But time has moved on. The subconscious doesn't have any conscious ability to measure time. So as far as the subconscious is concerned, Sarah can't wear flip-flops, therefore we're never going to wear flip-flops. We need to say to the subconscious, you've done a great job. You've prevented me from pain all these years, but actually now you can stop. You don't need to do this anymore. You're relieved of your duties. You're not going to be made redundant because every part of the crew has a job. It's their job to protect my foot, this part of the crew. But they can now go off and do something else. They can go off and tell me I'm wonderful every morning or something like that. So you just say, can you now please stop? Because this strategy is no longer helpful. It's no longer useful. You don't need to do it. And literally the subconscious goes, oh, okay, sorry, didn't realize, and change the thought pattern. It can be that fast. I had a lady who was, in her own words, addicted to chocolate. She'd had a gastric bypass to lose weight, but she was still hiding chocolate. She was going to the bathroom and eating chocolate. Real problem. She said, this is going to be so deep. This is going to take ages to sort this out. I had a quick conversation with the subconscious. Please don't eat chocolate anymore. It's making her unhappy. And from that day to this, she's never eaten a piece of chocolate. She actually came at the end of the session. She said, I fancy a piece of melon. Random, but okay. It doesn't always work that quickly. Sometimes the part of the subconscious takes some time to have a think about it and work things out. Sometimes there can be some resistance, but generally we get results within 3 sessions.
Beautiful. I love that. So many people have tried various therapeutic approaches like cognitive behavioral therapy that primarily engage the conscious mind. The question that comes to mind is what fundamental limitation exists when we only work at the conscious level, and how does remedial hypnosis overcome this barrier?
Okay, so in the first part of the first lockdown, I studied CBT. That's how I got into the whole thing. And when it's done properly, it's very good because it says, okay, thoughts promotes feelings, promotes behaviors. You change one of those, you change the whole process. But you can't override those deeper subconscious thoughts and fears. You can say consciously, I need to stop eating chocolate. It's not good for me. But there's a part of your subconscious as a member of the crew saying, listen, when we were little, we were unhappy. We got chocolate and we became happy. That strategy worked then. I'm going to keep on doing it because I don't know what else to do. I can see you're unhappy, so I'm going to tell you to eat chocolate because when you were 6, that worked. The subconscious doesn't have the ability to go, oh, okay, there are other things in play. That part of the subconscious is just doing its one job.
Would you agree that your brain is wired for survival as distinct from happiness?
Yes. Our brain is wired to be slightly negative. I think every animal is wired to be slightly negative because otherwise we would take unacceptable risks and we wouldn't survive. Survival is the main thing. When we're little, we rely on other people. We have to listen to them. We have to learn from them. When you're an adult, you can say, I don't need to do as I'm told anymore. I can take my own path. Now, there might be consequences. When you're a child, you can't say, I don't fancy going to school today. I think I'll just do something else instead. When you're an adult, you can say, I don't feel like going to work today. I'll do something else instead. There may be consequences, but they are your consequences.
The other key thing I wanted to touch upon was anxiety. This is a persistent companion that many of us know too well. Society, unfortunately, teaches us to suppress it, medicate it, distract from it, treating it as an unwelcome intruder, rather than what I see it as a messenger. Because the questions I was asking myself was, what if anxiety isn't the enemy? What if the uncomfortable feelings are signals from our deeper mind attempting to communicate something important that our conscious awareness has missed? I see from the conversations we've had, you've taken a different approach to anxiety in your hypnotherapy practice rather than seeing it as something to eliminate. How do you view anxiety purpose? And how does remedial hypnosis help people listen to and integrate these emotional messages?
That's a really good point. And I thank you for asking it, because anxiety is seen as the enemy. People say, I fight my anxiety. I have an anxiety disorder. Anxiety is an emotion, not an illness. Anxiety tells us when something is too important to ignore. And it's there every day. If you didn't have anxiety, you'd go out in the morning, you'd step out into the road, you wouldn't look both ways because you wouldn't see any value in doing that. Nobody would live very long without anxiety, because anxiety says, be careful. There might be a bus coming. Look both ways. Anxiety says, check you've got your keys before you slam the front door behind you, because otherwise you won't be able to get back into the house. Anxiety is an emotion. When you're going on holiday, anxiety says, get to the airport in time. There might be a traffic jam. There might be queues at security. You might have forgotten your passport. Make sure you've got your passport. So anxiety is there. You'll notice when you get to the gate and everybody's queuing up, you can then relax because anxiety has done its job and it can go down again. We rate anxiety on a scale of 0, which is absolutely nothing at all. You're completely relaxed. You're watching TV, up to 10, which is pretty much panic attack. For the average person, it should bump along at 2 or 3. There should be that little voice in the back of your head going, don't forget to do this. You've got to get up early tomorrow morning. It's a very busy emotion. If you've got something big on, an important date, job interview, catching that flight, it'll go up to 5 or 6, because these things are really important and you need to pay attention to them. You can't go off watching the rugby when you should be preparing for an exam. The problem is people don't like the feeling. It's not a nice feeling. So they feel anxious, and the physical signs are sweating and racing heart and feeling unease. And they go, I feel anxious. I don't like it. I don't like that feeling. And the problem is that can propagate that feeling to increase, especially if you ignore what your anxiety is telling you. It starts with a whisper. Get ready. You're going to miss your bus. Get ready. You ignore that. You're really going to miss the bus. And then what's going to happen is you're going to lose your job, and then you're going to lose your house. The worst things will happen. Then people go, oh my God, I'm so anxious. The way I describe anxiety to people is like a small child. It's not this big monster that's trying to hurt you. It's a small child that's tugging at your hand saying, you need to do this. Are we okay? I'm a bit worried about this situation. And your job, the captain's job, your conscious job, is to say to that child, yes, we're fine. Yes, I'm going to do that. I know what I need to do, and I will do it in time. I know we're heading into a difficult meeting at work, something that's very anxiety inducing, but I've prepared my notes. He told me to stop watching television and get on with my prep. So we're going to be okay. Anxiety can work for people, not against them. But yeah, if you fight it, if you ignore it, if you are scared of it, then it is going to become debilitating.
Helpful anxiety that protects us and problematic anxiety that prevents us or limits us. How does your work help to distinguish between the two?
Okay, so I would say that anxiety is anxiety. It becomes problematic when it's telling you to deal with something that's outside of your control. And that's when it can be distressing. So if somebody's in a bad situation with regard to a relationship or work or housing or whatever their situation is, and anxiety is saying you really need to earn some more money, and you're going, I can't earn more money. That's when I would talk to that part of the subconscious and say, look, you're not being helpful. The message you're giving is the right message, but we can't do anything about this. So can you just tone it down? Just stop, because this person knows what they need to do, but they can't do it. The subconscious is trying to do these things for the right reason. It just doesn't have that capacity to look at the big picture. If anxiety is saying this relationship is bad for you and you're going, I know, but my situation is such that I can't just get up and leave. It's just concentrating on the fact that you're unhappy. It's not looking at the global picture. So what I do when I'm working with clients is we try to pinpoint, it could be health anxiety, social anxiety, find that part of the subconscious, talk to that part of the subconscious, explain if it's necessary to stop doing what it's doing or just lower the volume a lot or change the focus onto something else. I talk about the conscious and subconscious, but they're all part of the same person. So what we want is a whole system to be working together.
I want to touch on how people view traditional hypnotherapy. For many people, and I know it's changing, it conjures up images of passive subjects in deep trances, receiving, suggestions from this authoritative therapist. Your approach is radically different. The direct conscious conversation with parts of the mind that are typically hidden from awareness, I think that challenges many people's conventional understanding of what hypnosis is and how therapeutic change occurs. Can you walk us through what actually happens in a remedial hypnosis session and how do you establish communication with the subconscious and what surprises clients most about this process?
Yes, of course. I trained with a guy called Tim Box, who was a traditional hypnotherapist. He would be putting people into a trance, doing the work with them, bringing them out of the trance. And he happened upon one day, he came to the realization that the trance element wasn't actually necessary. The subconscious is a lot closer to the surface than we think. I always start with an initial consultation, which is free of charge, completely no obligation, normally about an hour. During that initial consultation, we do some tests to see if the subconscious will talk to me. We actually use what's called IMRs, which is an idiomotor response. I say to the subconscious, if you want to talk to me, lift a finger. And all of a sudden, a client's finger will move and they'll go, what are you doing? I didn't move that finger. The finger movement is involuntary. They're not doing it. The theory is when people play with Ouija boards and they all swear that they're not moving the glass, it's the subconscious that's moving it. So I simply say to the subconscious, okay, can we have one finger as a yes response and one finger as a no response? Then the conversation starts. It's very pragmatic. It's very solution focused. I had a session with a lady yesterday and she wasn't consciously aware of what the problem was. We got a couple of no's. In practice, how it works, that we have the conversation and hopefully the subconscious will say, okay, didn't realize it was wrong. I'll say, can you make the change? Yes, make the change. That's it. But sometimes we'll have no response at all or no, I'm not going to change. So I will say, can this part of the subconscious put into the client's conscious mind what the problem is? And the client will go, oh, this thought's just popped into my head. This thing. I had a lady who was giving up smoking and we couldn't quite get there. I said, okay, put into the conscious mind what the problem is. She says, I'm going to get fat. So subconscious, I'm not giving up cigarettes because I'll put on weight. We were able to deal with that objection. Now imagine if that had been a traditional hypnotherapy. She'd been put into a trance, come out, said, oh, I'm not worried about getting fat, back into the trance, do the work. It makes it very long-winded. This way, it's much more of a conversation. The person's aware of what I'm saying, it's aware of the fingers moving there. Very often when I say to the subconscious, okay, make this change to the thought patterns, you can see their body moving. Big deep breaths and big relaxation. 5 minutes later, it's, oh, where's that trauma gone? Where's that anxiety gone? That thing I was frightened of 5 minutes ago, fear's gone. It's that emotional connection, that part that's always had that job. It's said, okay, I don't need that anymore. I'll go off and do something else. It's life-changing.
You mentioned earlier in your practice, clients will change remarkably quickly in as few as 3 or 4 sessions, which contradicts the common belief that deep psychological change takes months or years. I would contend by what you're talking about is remedial hypnosis is very efficient compared to other therapeutic approaches.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you're dealing with the core issue and the part of you that can change. So yes, you could go to traditional therapy and CBT works for a lot of people, but for people where they don't understand where the thought patterns or the behaviors are coming from, that's when my method can work. If you're just talking to the captains again, yes, I know I need to stop smoking. I know that I need to make these changes. When people say there's a part of me, do you ever use that phrase? I know I should do this, but there's a part of me that says, oh, I won't bother. Or there's a part of me that is stopping me from progressing in my career because I'm frightened of being made to look stupid or something like that. I say, okay, let's talk to that part. That part exists. That part was created for a reason.
Parts therapy.
That is very, it's similar, but that's very rigid. It's a very rigid method. For me, it's much more fluid. You've got your crew, and your crew is doing their jobs. And 99% of the crew are all working together. That's why the whole process does work. It's just the ones that are going, I think I'll sail in this direction.
I also see that within your practice, there is a lot about self-discovery and integration. I find there's something profound about becoming whole, integrated those fragmented parts of ourselves into a unified consciousness, like reconciling with estranged family members. We can heal the relationship between our conscious and subconscious minds, creating internal harmony instead of conflict. This journey of self-discovery seems to be at the heart of genuine transformation. How does remedial hypnosis help people develop a healthier relationship with their subconscious mind long term beyond resolving specific issues?
The majority of the work is done in the first session. The second session is just making sure that everything's okay and making any tweaks. The third session is all about teaching the client how to use this method for themselves. So they actually get their own fingers moving, and we will resolve something very small, just so that it can prove to themselves. I use it all the time. I've stopped smoking. I've stopped eating biscuits and chocolates, and I've done all sorts of things. The way I look at it, or the way I explain it, is it's like having a whole group of employees. If you're really kind to them and you treat them nicely and you're a really good employer, they're going to do all these things for you because they want to. If you berate yourself, people who say that they're stupid or they're ugly or they're bad or they're boring or whatever, all they're doing is giving their crew those negative comments. The crew are just like a human would be. The shoulders will drop and they'll go, why should we do anything? Let's just eat more because she doesn't like us. We're useless. We're awful. Then you get into this cycle. For me, whatever happens in my life, when I wake up in the morning, and it's a terrible English, but it's great Yorkshire, not from Yorkshire, but I'm all right, me. I'm all right. I'm happy being me. I'm very happy with my crew, and I regularly say, thanks, guys. Great job today. Or something happened today, never mind, tomorrow's another day. I don't advocate people talking to themselves in the supermarket, but to be aware of who you are and that you have this great internal structure in your mind, in your body, who will do their best for you. We'll make mistakes, get things wrong, we'll mess up sometimes. That's okay. We do that. We're humans. But being really kind to yourself, being really good to yourself, what harm can that do? Can never do any harm. So that's a big thing that we do in session 3 is learning how to talk to people. I'd love people to come back to me, but I'd much prefer them to be empowered to make changes themselves.
I wish we could all adopt the medical axiom of do no harm, especially to oneself.
Trauma, I touched on trauma a moment ago, and it sounds weird, but trauma is one of my favorite things to work with because trauma is a specific part of the crew. To explain when something traumatic happens, whether it be in childhood or something like a car accident, if there's no way of figuring out what happened, a member of the crew, a member of the subconscious, will be assigned a role to find out what happened, specifically to stop it happening again. So to use a car accident, for example, if you're in an accident and you can say, okay, I was texting, or the other person was drunk, or the road was icy, or there was a problem with one of the cars, then it's unlikely to be traumatic because you can say there was this sequence of events, car crash happened, we know how to avoid that in the future. But sometimes, and certainly when other people are involved in the case of abuse or whatever, there is no answer. So that little piece of the subconscious says, I must find out what happened. I keep rerunning this event. So that's when you get the flashbacks and the nightmares and the intrusive thoughts. If we did something different this time, was it my fault? Could I have avoided it? That's why you get this cycle, this hamster wheel of, I must work it out, so that you can say, okay, this is exactly why it happened. And if I don't do that again in the future, that can't happen again. It's like a detective trying to figure it out.
So does it make assumptions and then assign whatever it thinks it should be in order to make sense out of it?
The problem is with some traumas, you can't make sense out of it because it's trying to find the unsolvable puzzle. It's trying to say, okay, I must find an answer. And that's the problem. The subconscious doesn't know there's not an answer. So it will keep trying to find one because it's important to stop it happening again. So what we do is find that part of the subconscious and say to them, there will never be an answer. I'm sorry to say this, all this work you've done, there's never been an answer. You need to let it go because all you're doing is taking away from the person's happiness. And that's the one way you get this huge release from the client. I had one lady who'd had 3 separate traumas in a very short period of time. Afterwards, she said, I can still remember them, but it's like they're covered in oil. I can reach for them and they just slip out my hand. They're there. They've happened. They don't affect me anymore. They're not who I am anymore. That's really rewarding in terms of work because trauma is a terrible thing.
Maybe that's something to think about if you'd like to come back some other time and talk about trauma specifically. I'd love to have a conversation about that because I think it's an important issue that people need to know about and know what options are available to them.
Yeah, I'd love to. I think that the main takeaway is that anything the mind can learn, it can unlearn. Something that people often say to me is this change going to be permanent? I've stopped smoking, I've stopped eating chocolate, I've stopped being anxious, the trauma's gone. Is it going to come back? The analogy I use, I love analogies, is a guy who circumnavigated the world. Anyway, there's a Portuguese explorer. Portuguese were the first explorers. He set off to circumnavigate the world or to sail around the world. Now, a lot of his sailors believed that the world was flat. And at some point, they were going to fall off the edge of the earth. They were very brave to set out. He actually died on the expedition, but several years later, they turned up back in Lisbon. And those sailors knew that the world was round. They didn't fall off the edge. They couldn't unlearn that information.
Magellan.
That's the one.
I just looked it up on Google.
His sailors knew that the world was round because they hadn't fallen off the edge. They couldn't unlearn that information. Their awareness had changed permanently. And that's what I say to clients. Once you know this information, once you know this change, once your subconscious has made the change and can see that the results are positive, why on earth would they go backwards?
So their neural pathways get encoded.
Yeah.
New information.
Yeah.
Yes. I know people use gym analogies all the time. If I'm doing a bicep curl and I'm breaking down that tissue, the nervous system goes, hey, you might do that again. We better lay down some more tissue to make it stronger. It doesn't go back unless you don't do anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We're very much creatures of habit. Nobody's actually managed to figure out how many thoughts we have a day, but apparently 80% of them are repetitions. Need to get up out of bed, make a cup of tea. We're not quite as complicated as we perhaps are sometimes.
For listeners who are intrigued by your approach, but perhaps apprehensive about hypnosis, what would you say to address their concerns and how might they begin exploring their own subconscious patterns?
Okay, so the first thing I'd say is, as I mentioned, I always start with this free, no obligation, 1 hour Zoom session. It's important to have a good relationship from both sides. There are people who've decided not to work with me and vice versa. So we always have this chat. And we always ask the subconscious 2 questions. 1, are you aware of the issue? Have you been listening to what we've been talking about? And 2, are you prepared to work with me? It doesn't matter. Even if I got 2 no responses, as long as I get a response, as long as the subconscious is able to communicate, and there are other methods we can use. The fingers is the gold standard because it's a visual and direct response. So we make sure that we can deal with the issue before clients take the step of booking the sessions and paying. And what I would say is that if anybody comes to me via this podcast, I'd be very happy to give a 25% discount on the fee. I mentioned that we normally take 3 sessions. Sometimes we take longer. If we need more sessions, I don't charge more. As far as I'm concerned, when we have that first session and we agree to work together, we work together until the work is complete. Now, that could be 2 sessions. Sometimes it could be 6 or 7. Doesn't matter. We carry on until the work's complete.
Where can people find you?
My website is outofchaostherapy.com. I live in a small village called Chaos in central Portugal. So outofchaostherapy.com. You can also find me on Facebook and LinkedIn. I'm not really very active on any other social media.
Do you have any parting words for listeners?
Be kind to your crew. Be nice to your crew. They're working hard for you. They're doing their best. If they make mistakes, they're only human. Be nice to yourself. Listen to what your mind is telling you. Be the adult in the room and decide what action to take. And the last thing I'd say is your record for getting through difficult days currently stands at 100%. Always remember that.
That's so well said. Beautiful. Thank you, Sarah. You've taken us into the depths of the human mind, shared with us some of the profound power of remedial hypnosis, not as a mystical trance state, but as a direct conversation with the subconscious part of ourselves operating on outdated childhood programming. We've explored how this approach differs fundamentally from traditional therapies, bypassing the logical mind to address the emotional engine room beneath. You've shown us how quickly and effectively change can happen when we speak directly to these deeper parts of ourselves with kindness, compassion, and understanding, as distinct from fighting against them. And I love the ship metaphor. That's helped me to understand how divided our consciousness can become and the practical examples of transformation. This conversation, I feel, offers hope for anyone struggling with habits, anxiety, or emotional patterns that have resisted conventional approaches. I want to express my deepest gratitude to you, Sarah, for sharing your wisdom and expertise with us today.
Thank you, Peter. It's been lovely talking to you. Really appreciate it.
You're most welcome. If you'd like to learn about Sarah's work or connect with her for a consultation, details will be in the show notes. Thank you once again for showing us that we don't have to be prisoners of our past programming and that change can happen quickly and profoundly. Our subconscious minds are not enemies to be conquered, but allies waiting to be engaged. I see that your work is changing lives. Thank you, Sarah. How have you experienced the conversation today?
Very much enjoyed it. Thank you. You gave me lots of space, but when I was starting to run out of steam, you were able to come in, move me on to the next bit. So thank you.
Bye, Sarah.
Bye.
Bye.